randomness as to when all that happens. There's not an instantaneous, I'm pushing and it happens. No, it's like there's a much more fuzzy interaction. So we need to change cause and effect. How do we judge that? How do we judge if we're going to change our version of cause and effect from like a direct contact into this indirect contact, and then into this idea where there's multiple effects possible, and from quantum mechanics, or take if we say the universe is mathematical and there's a mathematical metaphysics, how do we know whether we put it in set theory and constructibility, in classical arithmetic, and the rational numbers and the irrational numbers? Or, how do we judge? Right? Right, because how do we judge our physical laws is this metaphysics, what you're calling metaphysics. I'm saying they're just more abstracted physical principles. You're saying they're metaphysics. How do we judge them? We've got to transition from physics to metaphysics. How do we judge the metaphysics? By perceptions. By perceptions. You will give me your law of identity. I'll see how well it works. I'll say your law of identity sucks at recognizing rivers and waves in the ocean. So we're going to fix that because I noticed that the substance is changing. My perceptions have broken your definition. So metaphysics is what? It's perception. It's back to physics because perception is physics. Now let me explain too, and I was going to say to thou art that. I have very broad definitions of perceptions. Everything is a perception, basically. Everything. Any feeling or thought that can come wafting by your brain is a perception. We often think of perceptions as the sense perceptions, or an imaginary perception that's related to the sense perceptions, like, a dream that comes as a picture. Okay, it's not a sense perception, but it's in this sense perception space, the visual space. That's the kind of media, that's the kind of message that I can get. But I think feelings of hunger is a perception. I also think hunger is a sense. Why? Because a sense to me is a perception that's related to the material world, and it can be somewhat indirect. And so that a perception is going to be a mix between elements created, internally, and those that are more directly from the external world. Something like hunger, just like vision. Vision, light hits a tissue in our brain notices the tissue and forms an idea because of that. Same thing with hunger. The chemicals are washing through us or not, and our tissues are affected. Our body detects that and then generates the image of hunger. And these are perceptions. And so it's very wide, any perception. Same thing with empiricism. It's not exactly the same as physics or science. It means using your perception. Now in science, certain perceptions, they focus on the traditional measurable quantities of space, time, mass. And we can do things with empiricism that the scientists aren't really into now, but they could become or are in essence part of the empirical process. So for example, I could have a little study of my dream world. I could just keep a dream journal. And that would be an empirical study of a highly subjective thing, dreams. But it would be an empirical study. Would it be scientific? Well, no. It's scientific, it could be made scientific, if you were very regular in how you did it, maybe, and get all of the information you could. What did you eat? And, you could try to approach it. It would be pretty hard to make it scientific in the sense of a physicist would think it was scientific, but you probably make it scientific enough for a research psychologist to think it was scientific. Because you can incorporate empiricism. Because empiricism is just reasoning from perceptions. Now, some of the perceptions are consistent, and the material world is whatever is making those things consistent. Physics, then, is the study specifically of that kind of consistency. But empiricism is not limited to that. Empiricism is just limited to any image processing. And part of that is to know that the things that seem most directly related to this material world are whichever is most consistent. Okay. So you said that there are things beyond empiricism that we can't study. And I don't know, I don't think so. Okay. You said moral truths could not be studied by empiricism. And if that's true, then morality is immaterial. synonym for irrelevant, more or less. And that's my dismissive part of metaphysics, I guess. But I just don't believe that. Part of my goal, because I have this view, is to explain morality in an empirical framework, in an experiential framework, I think I should call it. And that's why I base it on, first of all, our shared personal identity. So I can identify as, a Raiders fan, and then I have a sense of identity. And if you say all Raiders fans are idiots, I feel like you're talking about me, even if you said it to some other guy and don't even know me. That sense of personal identity allows us to associate in a group, and morality is rules about how to treat other members in a group of which I'm part. That's exactly what I think that it is, and that's all that it is. I believe there's a morality for the individual, which, I'm a group of parts, I'm a group of cells, and I have a relationship with myself. Personal morality is firstly how you should treat yourself. And then beyond that, you have larger groups, your family, your community, your nation, your species, your, all the mammals, the biosphere. If aliens came, we could all sentient creatures. There's these groups that we could identify in. And that's where morality comes from. It's in any given group, how should you work with the people that are part of that group? And it's a very material definition. And, it's an alternate definition. It's not the only kind of... It's not... Morality is an invention, and this is how I would invent it. And again, it's like with the river definition. It's so that when we... As much as possible of what we've been talking about morality remains sensible. The word morality still has more or less the same meaning it used to have. But then on the edges, where we have these moral problems, it directs us to certain moral solutions. And because of the, the nature of, this Russian doll kind of thing, where there's a personal identity and an identity of you as a member of your family, and then of you and your family as a member of a community, and that community and you and your family as a member of a larger community,